Heaven Man. So vivid was the Great Father's celestial image, and so overpowering was his influence on civilization in its infancy, that the ancient chroniclers often gave him human form, recalling him as the first man. But he was no mortal of flesh and blood, a celestial giant whose body encompassed all the gods and composed the primeval matter of creation. The Great Father reigned over the prosperous age, and then departed amid great upheaval. The mythical accounts give this imposing figure such tangible and human traits. More than one scholar reduces him to a living man, an esteemed tribal ancestor whose heroic exploits succeeding generations progressively enlarged until the entire universe came under his authority. This is the approach of William Ridgway, who, in a survey of the best-known figures of the Great Father, argues that only an actual tribal chief could have left such a profound imprint on primitive communities. Ridgway asks us whether the abstract sky, or the solar orb, or a vegetation spirit, common explanations of the Great Father, could produce such devotion, as is evident in the annual lamentations over the ruler's catastrophic death. Osiris, Brahma, Tammuz, Quetzalcoatl. Their devotees remember each as a living ancestor, whose passing was a terrifying calamity. Of course, Ridgway does not assume that one man alone accounts for all the traditions of a Great Father. Rather, he seeks to identify each in terms of a historical figure, quite distinct from the venerated ancestors of other tribes. If his argument against prevailing astronomical and vegetation theories carried great weight, they failed to explain the global parallels between the respective myths. Nor can one reconcile Ridgway's interpretation with the incontrovertible fact that, in the earliest accounts, the Great Father is manifestly cosmic. That many sacred histories, however, present the Creator King in human form is a paradox requiring an explanation. The solution lies in the nature of the legendary first man. Who was Adam? If one compares the traditions of Adam with the global image of the Great Father, there can be little doubt that this primeval ancestor was simply a special form of the universal monarch. According to Hebrew legend, Adam's stature was so great that he extended from earth to the center of heaven. His countenance obscured the sun. Like the universal monarch, Adam was Lord on earth, to rule and control it, teaching his subjects first arts, then sciences. Well, he had his priorities straight. The myths say that the terrestrial creatures took him to be their creator, and they all came to offer him adoration. While the chroniclers call this a mistake, substantial evidence shows that the tradition pertained more to a god than a man. In Gnostic and other mystic systems, Adam is not a mortal but a cosmic being whose body contained the seed of all later creation, as observed by G.G. Shalom. Summarizing the traditions of the Hebrew Kabbalah, Adam, or Adam Kadmon, is the primordial man, that is, a vast representation of the power of the universe, which is concentrated in him. This Adam is the man of light, occupying the center of the cosmos and radiating energy along the axis of the universe. He is creator and supporter of the world, whose body encloses all the elements of life. And one interesting side note is that in astrology, which is also Hermeticism, basic principles, they have the cosmos in the shape of a man, and his head is by, I believe it's the Pleiades, which represents man's third eye, the pineal gland. Islamic mystics called Adam the universal man, or perfect man, upholding the cosmos. To the Ophites of the early Christian era, he was Adonis, the man from on high, or, in the words of Lenormant, the typical perfect man, that is, the heavenly prototype of man. It is one of the cosmonic fragments preserved in the extracts of Sanctuariathon, as recorded by Philo of Byblos. Adam is born at the beginning of all things, and is identical with the Greek Uranos, heaven. The modern-day Mandeans of Iraq know Adam as the king of the universe, a personification of all spiritual man, of all that spiritual man is intended to be and achieve. This, of course, sounds almost exactly like the primordial God One of global legend. Indeed, in the myths of many lands, the first man and creator king are identical, though the Hindu Yama and his counterpart Manu appear as the creator and king of the world. They also signify the primal ancestor. Their character as the first man, however, does not mean flesh and blood. They are the celestial prototypes, notes Lenormand, symbolic of man in general. The role in the Hindu Yama is filled in Persian myth, not only by Yama, but also by Gaya Maritan, a legendary first king, a man of perfect purity, produced brilliant and white, radiant and tall. Sounds like an extraterrestrial. He too appears as the prototype of mankind. Many myths make no distinction between the creator and the first man. The oceanic Tiki is at once the first man and the creator or progenitor of man. Among the Koryak, the creator of the world is also the first man, the father and protector of the Koryak. In Assembleon, North American Sayun tribe say that it was the first man who brought the world out of the primeval water. They also say that the first man, the creator, that no man made him, and that he is immortal. The Ultiac Tartars similarly speak of a world man or first man. In the creation myths, he doubles for God himself and raises the world from the cosmic waters. Comparable is the world man of the Lapps, or the lonely man whom the Yakuts deem the first ancestor and whose dwelling pierced the summit of heaven. If the general tradition be our guide, Adam is the solitary god of beginnings, presented in human form. This was the opinion of the controversial Gerald Massey, who, enchanted by the depth of Egyptian cosmology, proposed that the Hebrew Adam echoed the older Egyptian Atum, the god who shone forth alone in the abyss. It matters little whether the relationship of the two figures is as direct as Massey suggested. Throughout the ancient world, the original god passed into the legendary first ancestor as the creative intelligence and voice, word of heaven. The Great Father came to be viewed as the thinking and speaking man, a towering giant whose body was the original cosmos. Both the tomb and later Adam possessed this distinctive character as heaven man, as in astrology too. But certain developments of the idea stand out. 1. The Egyptian version of the myth, the great god Atum-Ra, through tumultuous speech, brings forth a circle of subordinate gods as satellites, revolving in his company and forming his own limbs. The central god and his revolving members compose the primordial cosmos, heaven, world. The crucial term is Paut, P-A-U-T. It means primeval water, primeval matter, referring to the material emitted by Atum, which took form as the cosmos. Paut is equivalent to the Ku, or fiery words of power, uttered by the great god. The term signifies at once the circle of the gods and body of Atum Ra, which is to say cosmos equals company of gods equals creator's limbs body. That the created cosmos emanated from the primordial God is a theme which persisted in later traditions of Adam. From Adam Kadmon sprang successive degrees of creation. Gnostic tradition knew Adam as the prima materia of the cosmos, a remarkable parallel to the Egyptian primeval matter, the limbs of Atum Ra. The great god's body embraces and is heaven, not only in Egyptian but all principal cosmology. Like Atum, the Sumerian An encompasses the entire heaven. Indeed, this very name signifies heaven, and one can trace the equation of God in heaven, or shining heaven, through all of the ancient languages. The Chinese Tian signifies both the high God and heaven, as does the Altiac Tengri, the Sanskrit Dias and heaven, as does the Altaic Tengri. Dias, Latin Deus, carries the double meaning of God and heaven. It is useless to look to the open sky for an explanation of this equivalence. Originally, heaven meant the orchestrated cosmos, or body, of the God One, formed by the circle of lesser gods. The myths unanimously insist that this celestial order collapsed with the death of the great God, the Heaven Man. 2. All-embracing character of the Great Father facilitated an important development of the God's image at a time when cultural mixture could have destroyed the monotheistic theme. In ancient Egypt, almost every district seems to have had its favored representative of the God One, a fact which gives the great compendiums of Egypt, religion, pyramid texts, etc., a misleading appearance of confusion. How can we speak of a solitary God when Egyptian texts refer to an endless number of primary deities? 3. In a subsequent development of the myth, the Heaven Man passed into a mythical philosophical explanation of our earth and the material universe as a whole. Here the god appears as a primordial giant who existed before the deluge and gave his body to creation, not the creation of the primordial cosmos, but of our world with its mountains, seas, clouds, and surrounding heavenly bodies. A noteworthy example is the Scandinavian primeval giant, Ymir. In the prose, Edda, the gods fashioned the world from the giant's body. From his blood, the sea and lakes. From his flesh, the earth. From his bones, the mountains. His teeth become rocks and pebbles. His skull, the sky. And his brains, the clouds. The sparks and burning embers produced by his dismemberment became the stars. Compare the Hindu giant Purusha, whose body formed the world. His mouth was the Brahman, his 2 thighs the Vyase. From his 2 feet the Sudra was born. The moon was born from his mind. It's pretty crazy. From his eye the sun was born. From his navel was produced the air. From his head the sky was evolved. From his 2 feet the earth. From his ears the quarters. Purusha is the primal man. In Buddhist lore, this cosmic giant is Bodhisattva Manjukri. Elsewhere in China, the role belongs to the demiurge Panku, whose body provides the material for creation. Zoroastrians claim that the created world was the giant sphere, cosmos, the body of the great god Zervan. All such heaven-sustaining giants can be best understood by reference to the original cosmos of the God One, rather than the open expanse to which the term heaven normally refers to today. 4. If the giant myths emphasized the material form of the heaven man, an age of metaphysics stressed the god's character as universal intelligence, raising his image to a high degree of philosophical purity. The God One became the first principle, first cause, mind, word or self, logos, Sophia, Tao, etc. Yet, in none of these cases did detached philosophy succeed in creating a pure abstraction. The Greek nous, N-O-U-S, the animating mind or intelligent spirit, was never fully divorced from the antecedent tradition of the heaven man. Both Vesuvius and Syncellus tradition of heaven man. Both Vesuvius and Syncellus identify the great mind with Prometheus, the primordial man who lived before the deluge. In Orphic description of the universal mind, it is hardly distinguishable from the Hindu giant Purusha. All things were contained within the vast womb of the god. Heaven was his head. Bright beams of stars were his radiant locks, and all productive earth was his sacred womb. The circling ocean was his belt. His body, the universe, was radiant, immovable, eternal, and pure ether was his intellectual soul. The ancients knew the mighty nous, by which he pervades, animates, preserves, and governs all things. Nous was the primordial one from which all things emanated, the central light which produced and regulated the cosmos body. An exactly equivalent notion was the Hindu universal self. There, the original concept certainly did not mean invisible soul, or anything like it. The cosmic self was Brahma, or Prajapati, the golden child, who appeared alone on the first occasion. In the beginning, say the Upanishads, Prajapati stood alone. The same texts say, in the beginning there was self alone. From the primordial self, enclosed all the life elements, issued the creation in successive degrees. From the self sprang ether. From the ether, air. From air, fire. From fire, water, etc. Adam Kadmon radiated the elements in similar fashion. Hindu thought portrays the universal self as the first form in the animating soul of the heaven man. In the beginning, this universe was nothing but the self in the form of a man. It looked around and saw there was nothing but itself, whereupon its first shout was, "It is I," whence the concept I arose. Then the self poured forth the creation. The created world, cosmos, in Hindu myth, took form as the giant Purusha, recognized as the body of Prajapati, Brahma self. Numerous traditions, the emanation or pouring out of creation, as the Greek god's speech. This is the root meaning of the Greek and Hebrew word, which signify really visible speech. The Chinese Tao, the primeval unity or first cause, also conveys the idea to speak. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, states the Hebrew psalmist 33:6. This idea of the creative word of God, observes John Allegro, came to have a profound philosophical and religious importance and was, and still is, the subject of much metaphysical debate. But originally it was not an abstract notion. You could see the Word of God. In the Hebrew creation legend, the speech of the Creator is poured out as spittle or seed. The most forceful spurting of this seed is accompanied by thunder and the shrieking wind. The imagery takes us back to the thundering voice of Atum. In most creation myths, and certainly in the Egyptian and Sumerian prototypes, the Great Father, his life-bearing rays, his voice, word, and the company of gods, limbs, gods, limbs, all appear as powers seen and heard. The god is the celestial man, whose history became the overwhelming obsession of ancient ritual. Residing at the stationary center, the domain, which the Egyptians called the Mat, M-A-A-T, truth or wisdom, and the Mesopotamians denominated Apsu, residence of wisdom. The god commanded the cosmic revolutions. He was, in short, the creative intelligence, producing a new and harmonious celestial order. This was the heaven man, the ideal man, and the ideal king.